So this is the fourth talk that I've given to the Institute of General Semantics, and I think this one's going to kind of sum up my previous three and give a new way of looking at what the singularity would be, what hacking people are, and what we could possibly do about our technological world, right? So the self-reference stack is something that I've developed from studying neural networks, right? One of the words that they're using all the time, it's like a buzzword, is the stack, right? And the stack is this heuristics that you employ, the order of the heuristics next to the data and how the data structure itself, right? And that makes this thing called the stack. And so then your self-reference stack is going to be your set of heuristics next to the amount of information that you have available inside of yourself, right? And so if we imagine a tribe 50,000 years ago, what they had available to them within their self-reference stack are going to be able to be primitive technologies, the words of others, the actions of others, right? There's going to be a certain media ecological landscape that they can actually incorporate into their self-reference stack. As we developed our technology, we've increased the types of things that can incorporate into our self-reference stack. One of the more important technologies that we invented were books. And so the difference between someone who has books in their self-reference stack and doesn't is the word illiterate, right? You're illiterate if you don't have books within or the capability of incorporating books within your self-reference stack. And so one of the important points of our development as a species, almost in a time-binding way, was the ability to not only write books, but incorporate books into our self-reference stack and then make relationships to people self-referencing those new things, right? And so as we move along through history, what we're doing is adding and changing the overall heuristics, and then it's always going to kind of be data different for each person, but there's also going to be data that's the same, that's context specific, you know? So if we're in the 21st century, we can all talk about Facebook pretty easily, but if I try to use the term 100 years ago, that's just not in the self-reference stack for enough people to be able to make it meaningful. So when it comes down to the self-reference stack, I have another term called the cultural stack, and I kind of redefine culture being any interaction between two things. So there's this thing on its own, electron, there's a proton on its own. When they interact with each other, they're making a new object that needs to be studied as its new object. I would call all this culture. Right? Anytime you have interactions of two independent objects and they come to some mutual agreements together and they're doing some type of dance or some type of movement, right? Then they are now in a culture, right? And so then the cultural stack is going to be the stack that contains all of our self-reference stacks, right? And how we relate to each other. So the cultural stack and the self-reference stack relate to each other in the sense that you can get changes in the self-reference stack to the cultural stack, from the cultural stack back to the self-reference stack it is a feedback loop, period. And so when it relates to what we're dealing with technology today, the self-reference stack is exactly what's under attack by, let's say, something by Facebook or adversarial third parties in hostile countries, or even adversarial parties within our own country. So what is going on with mind control and is essentially, I want to set up the heuristics, your heuristics in your self-reference stack, and I want to dominate the data that you're going to be able to employ those heuristics to. And so if I can do that, essentially I've set up the entire thing that I would need to set up to ground your movements the way that I want. So an example of this is like, let's say I'm a Russian agent and I just want Americans to fight more. It's going to be in my purview and something I want to do. What I can do is, what we've done is we've gone on the internet, met people, talked to them, and changed their self-reference stack. So when they go out into the cultural stack, they're now acting in a way that they wouldn't have acted if they were only attenuating to the cultural stack. So we have this other type of thing in the, like, I don't want to call it a stack yet, you know what I mean? But like the adversarial attacks on the human nervous system that are coming from third parties like Facebook, like where they're trying to agitate you, right? Your agitation is a change in your self-reference stack fully, right? So you could have been integrated in, let's say, an affinity group where you guys were meditating all day and trying to get closer to Brahman, right? That's a change in your self-reference stack that would be different than what Facebook would want for you. And so the way Facebook wants you to have your self-reference stack defined or organized is actually the land of contention of what we need to talk about when it means freedom or to have a technological world at all. Because essentially what we're looking at with a democratic type world, right, would be each individual gets to modify and develop their own self-reference stack and then change their heuristics on their own thing.
Any other system, someone else is in control of my definition and my defining of myself, right? So my autopoetic ability, right, which would be what the self-reference stack actually is, right? If I am in control of it, it's autopoetic, my self-reference stack. Someone else is in control of it, we get into a completely different world. And so how this is relating back to the singularity is, as we move along, our self-reference stack is getting different heuristics and different relationships to information. But if I self-reference, like, let's say one of these posts that's out there trying to get men to hate women, right? Then I've essentially been hacked. No, in a big way, I've been hacked. So like if I wanted to like do something cyber to physical, I type something on the computer and then a physical action happens. A power plant blows up, right? So if I want to do cyber to physical on the human nervous system, I have to get the human to act a certain way differently than they would have and closer to my intentions. And so if they're self-referencing my machine language and they're actually fighting with each other, I've successfully deployed a cyber to physical attack on the human nervous system, right? And this is actually the world that we live in, right? Facebook is doing attacks on individual nervous systems to reference shift them to a place where they're now marked like sellable, like they can be put into like a portfolio and sold to another company. You know, like I've got you more Republicans, here you go, right? All those individuals could have been almost anything else than they would have been if they weren't interacting with the specific toxic type of technology we have. Because ultimately the self-reference stack lets us see, right, what we should do about the technology. What we should do about the technology is rearrange it so that individuals can have control over their own, like essentially autopoiesis, right? So Facebook, if they open sourced Facebook, right, made it illegal to hide data like that, right, then what we can do is make new algorithms and new ways of interacting with ourselves given that actual technology. We don't have to get rid of it, but we open source it. Then what I'm aiming to do is get into communities and practices with myself that are going to actually get me to be the one mastering my own self-reference stack. And essentially, yeah, that's it. I'm just going to end it there. Yeah, the whole point of what we want to do as a free society is get as many people to be able to autopoetically come into being. And that means there's a relationship they have with their self-reference stack. That means that the self-reference stack is something that they are considering and capable of considering, something that they're able to modify themselves. And any attempt to create a system or society that's not giving direct control over people over this property is a failure system when it comes down to freedom. And so that's my whole speech.